Okay, we are in Acts chapter 18. I once again had a 18:12. I once again had a burst of delusion about how much I wanted to walk this morning. And I was 15 minutes out before I could change my mind. And when you're 15 minutes out, you got to walk the 15 minutes back. So every additional minute is double that because you got to walk the minute back. I wasn't the only fool out there, though. There were others. One of them was really cheery. He was on the other side of the road. And I didn't even see him. I was walking by and he, morning, like Doug would or something. And then, so I had to say hello and wave back. Took me a minute or two to recover from that. All right. We're in Acts 18:12, which is the introduction to a character named Gallio. So we're in Corinth. If you look back at the text here, Paul's second missionary journey. We are in, which one have I got? Yeah, second journey here. We are in, go away. The little thing, thank you. We are in the second journey where he pushes out from Galatia. God makes him avoid Asia. And he ends up in, I'm going to make a little annotation thingy so I can point. And so he has traversed these Roman colonies. This is a pattern of Paul. One of the interesting things about the book of Acts is there's no mention whatsoever of any ministry in Tarsus, which is Paul's home city, where he credits his citizenship. I am Paul of Tarsus, a citizen of no mean city. So that's a Roman colony. Lystra is a Roman colony. The city in Antioch is a Roman colony. So that seems to be a pattern that Antioch is a Roman colony. That's a pattern that he developed in his ministry. And when he avoids Asia, he ends up in Philippi, the same thing, a leading city of Macedonia, as Luke called it. Thessalonica, which was the leading city of Macedonia. And then he ends up down in Athens, which was a free city. I don't know what the difference is between free and Roman colony. Maybe the pastor does. And then he ends up at Corinth, which is where we are now, which is a Roman colony. And so Corinth is the head of the provincial government for Achaia, the province of Achaia. That's Gallio, the proconsul of Achaia. Thessalonica was the head of the seat of provincial government in Macedonia. He went there. Ephesus is the seat of provincial government in Asia, and he will go there. And so you can see his patterns, and the patterns are, he's taking advantage of basically the world that was handed to him, the Roman world that was handed to him, where you have these very safe trade routes on the water. So he did it on his first journey. He went from Seleucia to Salamis and Cyprus, goes across the island to another port city, comes up here to Perga, port city, and then he heads in. But because of the Roman peace, the Pax Romana, it's very safe. And everybody speaks Greek. It's the language of commerce, and it's the common language of the day, which the New Testament is written in Koine Greek. And so he's going to take advantage of all of that and his Roman citizenship. Maybe there's a lot of reasons that he would go to these cities, but one of them is they're probably a little safer because you have Roman outposts with Roman military there, which is also going to be true of Judea because we have Caesarea on the third journey, coming back from the third journey, where Paul will be taken by the Roman commander in Jerusalem at the Antonia, what's it called? The Antonio Fortress? Yeah, I think so. Antonio Fortress on the Temple Mount. He's going to take him to Caesarea to keep him from being killed by the Jews because he's a Roman. And Caesarea is the seat of Roman administration in Palestine. And so it just keeps popping up all the way around. The other thing that's true about these cities, in almost every case, is they all have Hellenistic synagogues. And so you have this ready-made audience of God-fearing, Greek-speaking Gentiles that are just there, and they don't have the hang-up of exclusivity like the Jews do. So there's that as well. And so all of these forces come into play as these worldviews, the two main worldviews from our standpoint, from what we're interested in. You have Orthodox Hellenistic Judaism in all these cities for the most part, except Philippi, maybe. At least it's not mentioned. And then you have, Greco-Roman paganism that are mutually hostile to each other. And these Romans don't really like the Jews, and we're going to see that play out in the story about Gallio here in a second. But here comes the newcomer, Christianity, Hellenistic Christianity. And what are the Romans going to make of it? And what are the Jews going to make of it? We've already got a taste of that from the Jews, but we don't yet know. There's not really been a narrative determination, disposition of the case for Hellenistic Christianity in the Roman Empire. And so that's going to become the issue that's going to come before Gallio. What do we do as Romans? What do we do with this new thing called the followers of Christus, or whatever they call them? Are we going to allow that? Are we going to allow this new thing to happen in the empire, in the province? That's what Gallio is going to face, and it's self-conscious. He knows he's facing that. So let me close my notes here since you don't need to see that. And let's go back and start there. So we're in Corinth. There's this statement that he stays in the synagogue, talking to the Jews and probably his more particular interest, the Gentile God-fearers, the Greek God-fearers. And he's going to be there for a year and a half. We find that out in 11, a year and a half, teaching the word of God among them. And so in the middle of that somewhere, after some time, while Gallio was proconsul of Asia, you're a proconsul for 1 year. It's a 1-year appointment. So let's go back to the map. By the way, I got a new map. Actually, I don't have a new map. I have the same old map, but I'm doing a, whatever you want to call it, sermon-y talk. Talky sermon, whatever, in another church in a couple months. And they like black backgrounds instead of white backgrounds because it's dark. And so I don't know that really works in this room. But anyway, what do you think?
Wow.
That's the look. That's what I'm looking for. You think that's easier to read? Cool. Okay, we're gonna leave it up. All right. So it's also changed a little bit. I made a few changes to it, but not more stuff. Not more stuff.
That's gotta be the Kelly green and white.
Kelly green and white. Is that a color you just made up? Kelly.
No, that's a perfectly great color.
All right.
Spartans.
Oh, that's too dark.
Great Irish.
Okay, so actually, you're right. That is Irish. So Gallio was proconsul from mid-51 to mid-52. So we have one of the most important, sort of precise. If Gallio became proconsul in July of 51, which they are pretty serious about, and he served for 1 year, and the Corinthian ministry was on both sides of that, then we have a very good sort of center point to now date Paul's travels both backwards and forwards, which is
You
how
said
we do
July,
it.
that's very specific.
What?
Oh, because they put the Jewish conversion. Okay.
Yeah, so we know then that his second journey was right here, which pushes his first journey back here, which also pushes the letter to the Galatians back here. He couldn't, of course, written the letters to the Corinthians till after the second journey, or after he was in Corinth, which he was there for a year and a half. And so Paul, no, he was a young man in chapter 8. So go for it. Yeah, they weren't really particularly interested in that sort of thing. Luke wasn't particularly interested in that sort of thing. Nor did we have a way of doing it for the apostles either.
Right.
We know that we think that John, he can say more about this. We think that John lived to the 90s or not? You think that John lived to the 90s? So if the rest of them were the same age as John, the apostle, then they were some years younger than Jesus, because Jesus was born slightly before the turn of the millennium right here. At any rate, Gallio, the little things. Gallio's important in many ways. So let's go ahead and read and see what happens. Doesn't take, remember, these worldviews are colliding and they're coming into conflict, and they don't sit well with each other. And so what are the Romans going to do? Because now the Jews are going to come and ask for a ruling in regard to these troublemakers who are infecting their synagogue, because the synagogue really is at stake, right? I mean, we saw a picture of that already where Paul goes into the synagogue. He leaves the synagogue. He takes the ruler of the synagogue with him and goes next door. So if you used to be going to the synagogue and you still want to listen to Paul, you just turned left earlier. And they're going into the synagogue. They're seeing people missing, and the people are next door at Jason's house. So that's the situation, and they're not taking it. And so they're going to go ask for a ruling by the seat of the Roman government, the Roman governor. While Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, so Achaia is here, south of what would be, well, actually, this would all be Greece, right? At one point, is that true? I don't know enough geography to know how far Greece extends. Athens is right here, but no, Macedonia would be its own thing, just north of Greece. So this is Achaia, where Corinth and Athens are. And
Athens and Attica, and Achaia is where Corinth is. Corinth is
Oh, really?
at the bottom of the island.
Okay.
Splits. Roman splits.
All right.
Corinth.
the Jews with one accord rose up against Paul. We've seen this narrative over and over and over again, all the way back to Pisidian Antioch when he was in Galatia, when he got into Galatia. Brought him before the judgment seat, saying, "This man persuades men to worship God contrary to the law." And the question is, what law are they claiming he's worshiping contrary to? Because the text doesn't say. Now, if this was Judea, it's the Mosaic law, because they wouldn't have cared that, and that's exactly what they were arguing about Jesus. Here, it's not so clear. They know Gallio couldn't care less about the Mosaic law. It means nothing to him. So they're making a civil accusation that he's breaking the law, the Roman law, and they're asking for a ruling. When Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, he didn't even get a chance to make a defense, "If it were a matter of wrong or vicious crime, O Jews, it will be reasonable for me to put up with you." He doesn't want to be there. But if there are questions about words and names of your own law, look after it yourselves. I am unwilling to be a judge of these matters. And so instantly, he recognizes, no, this is not a violation of Roman law. They're having this is the important part, an internal Jewish dispute. And by implication then, what he's saying is, we Romans, at least in Achaia, are going to treat Christianity as a sect of Judaism. Exactly like Pharisaicalism or Sadduceicalism, whatever you would say that. So it's a very, very important ruling. He drove them away from the judgment seat, and they all took hold of Sosthenes, this new ruler of the synagogue, because remember, Paul stole the old ruler of the synagogue, at least that's the way I read it, began beating him in front of the judgment seat. But Gallio was not concerned about any of these things. So there's a very strong anti-Jewish sentiment that just kind of boils under the surface. Gallio appears to have found it advantageous to let the Greeks, the citizens, vet for a while. He's deliberately looking the other way at it. So they take Paul, the Jews take Paul before the Roman governor, expecting Paul to be punished. He shoos Paul away, doesn't even let him get a chance to speak. And he lets the Jews that brought him in get beaten. And the picture there that Luke presents, it's not comedy, but it's absolutely irony. It's what's the karma, whatever serendipity, one of them words worked in there somewhere. I've been wanting to find a way to use the word serendipity for a while. A friend of mine used it at work perfectly.
Gary, where do you get the bit that Paul took the old leader? You talking about justice?
Did I say Jason?
Pardon?
Is it Justice?
Titus Justice. Yeah.
Right here. Oh, it's Crispus. Good call, right there, yeah. He went to Titius Justus's house and he took Crispus, the ruler of the synagogue, with him. Sorry about, that's good. That's a good catch.
Thank
Actually, I was thinking about that, these names tossing around, and I actually made a list. We're gonna look at it later of these people. And try to keep track of them. We won't look at it right now, but yeah, there's a lot of names floating around. Good catch, Brian. Let's see. So that's the significance. It's not many verses, but all of it matters. All of it is significant. They don't care about Paul. They don't care about Hellenistic Christianity. They're treating it as a sect of Judaism, and Judaism has legal protection in the Roman Empire. So now when these other Roman governors, like the one in Asia, are wondering what to do about Paul, they have a precedent from the Roman governor of Achaia. So now Paul, you get this picture now in these provinces repeatedly, Hellenistic Christianity is, if not validated, it is acknowledged as not against Roman law. And so he will be able, in his third journey, he's going to do the same thing. He's going to go across to Asia, because there'll be a church in Ephesus by then. He's going to head over, he's going to Macedonia, back to Achaia. He's going to retrace his steps and head back down the water. So there's free reign in the Roman Empire for Hellenistic Christianity. Had he not done that, had he agreed with the Jews and shut Paul down, now that becomes the precedent, and Hellenistic Christianity is up against the obstacle of the Roman Empire. But as it is, they now, the Hellenistic Christianity enjoys the protections of Roman law, particularly out of the mouth of a Roman citizen, and not just one of them, because Silas is a Roman citizen as well. At least that's how I read it, with some help from people like Bruce. But it's just, it can seem a lot, that's true a lot here. It just can seem like a story. But the reason that it matters is understated. You don't see the significance of it unless you look behind the scenes a little bit. Read, it's like I've said before, it's this white space between the lines, an awful lot going on. And particularly in this case with Gallio. He can seem kind of like a bad man for allowing the Jews to be beaten like that. But from Luke's perspective, they bring Paul in to be beaten and imprisoned. And instead, the very man they wanted to do that drives him out, doesn't even want to hear from him, and he allows the Jews to be beaten. So,
Is that how it works?
no, I think, no, I mean, I don't know whether, nobody liked them. And look at the language that Gallio uses here. If he had really committed a wrong, Jews, and I'm saying, Gallio says, I don't see where he violated any Roman law here, then I would put up with you. Like he's done it, like, oh, here they come again. Right? And it just kind of boils under the surface. That's how I read it. There's not much to work on. You were talking about, what's the word count of this right here? That's the whole story, right? So that word count is 120 words or something. That's all you get. You get 12, 6 verses. But it's very, very significant to the progress of the gospel. And you can see God now working through, I mean, look at this. Just think about the what's going on here from that's what there is in the narrative, but from above the narrative, look at how the gospel is using the institutions and the engineering and the legal system of the Roman Empire as tools, as means by which to propagate the gospel. Right? It is a masterpiece of redemptive artistry. As God just, as all these forces from history prior to this moment come together, you have Roman outposts, you have this Roman citizen who enjoys legal protection, you have the engineering, the road system of the Roman Empire, the safety and security. Paul can just travel on these roads. Paul and his companions can travel on the roads. They have safe sea voyages, seaways to travel all over this side of the Roman, the eastern side of the Roman Empire. Everybody speaks the same language, Hellenistic Greek. You have Hellenistic Gentiles, Greek-speaking Gentiles in synagogues that have been there, that were there because of an exile that happened on a prior, because of a prior empire, the Babylonians, and all of that comes together to produce this artistry of gospel proclamation in 52 AD or something like that. And you just have to, you just gotta stop a moment, step back, and just marvel at the plan of God in the history of redemption. It's very, very creative, using every tool at his disposal, and they're all at his disposal. Was it all accidental that this world came together the way that it is? That's a pastor. That's which one is the one that implies the yes answer or the no answer? May implies no, right? Ooh,
I
may.
think may implies yes.
So this is-
May implies no.
This is ooh. You know Greek. Ooh. Is it a coincidence? No, it's not a coincidence. All right. Any questions or comments about that? That was all ad lib. It was just exclamation about some passages that we don't like to read because it looks like he's just moving from one city to another. But you know, you pull out a map and you look at these lines and what's true about these cities, and it's really is amazing to me. Okay, let's see. Back to the text. My notes. Gallio, just mention a few words about him. Gallio has very, very good blood from a Roman perspective. He is the brother of this man.
His nose.
This is one of the most famous philosophers in history, Seneca. Seneca the younger, his father, Seneca the elder, was also a statesman, Roman statesman, but he was an advisor to the upcoming Nero. And you know, you gotta, when you wed yourself to somebody, like if you're a mobster and you become an underboss for the Gambino, for John Gotti and the Gambino crime family, you rise and fall with him, and you better not lose his favor. Because if you lose your favor, you're dead. His favor, you're dead. And that's what happened to Seneca. He was an advisor to Nero and then fell out of favor. I don't remember why, but it says he died in 65. The way he died was he committed suicide. And Gallio went with him. Gallio died too. Gallio is his brother. So you got these aristocratic families. And then there was another one, I think they mentioned in this article, there's another brother. Let's see, his younger brother was the father of the poet Lucan. So, you know, these guys, we're talking about a class society, right? Everything is status. Status is everything. So was I going to say something else about this? I don't remember what it was. That's Seneca and Gallio, famous brothers. One of them popping into the New Testament right there. That's another thing about these maps. You know, look at the history. You know, the history. Paul, you know, so Paul was standing before the brother of one of the most famous statesmen, philosophers of his time, who wasn't yet, but would be an advisor to the next emperor. You know, and he's been to Philippi. We talked about the Battle of Philippi. You know, Athens. Guy lived a life, really did. I don't know that I would want it. Tough life. Okay. So the verdict of a Roman governor means much more than the verdict of a local verdict, right? So he ran into trouble with local magistrates. You remember he got beaten and thrown in jail by the local magistrates. Where was that? Was that Thessalonica? Philippi. And then the next morning, you know, he made him back down and escort him out of the city publicly, which was hugely embarrassing to them. But those are just local magistrates. A Roman governor making a ruling is a very, very different thing. And I think that's one of the important parts of this story. All right. So Christianity would be treated as a sect of Judaism and receive legal protection, just like the Jews, just like Judaism, the practice of anything in the Hellenistic synagogue, some kind of extension of the Hellenistic synagogue, because that's where Paul was. So, even from a worship standpoint, from Gallio's perspective, it's just a member of the synagogue. You're a stupid synagogue. You want me to make little fine distinctions between different groups in your synagogue? Come on, I'm not going to do that. So he doesn't. Okay, the fortunes of Christ. This is Bruce. The fortunes of Christianity begin to reverse after Nero married a woman who was a convert to Judaism, and I don't remember her name. After the burning of Rome in 64, then public sentiment turned violently anti-Christian. But that's 12 or so years away. And we'll talk at the end about what might have happened to Paul. Sothscenes is replacing Crispus as the ruler of the synagogue. One wonders if Paul nabbed him too eventually. All right, that's all I got to say about that. As Forrest Gump would say. Anybody want to say anything more about that? 18 through 23 is next. Paul having remained many days longer, which implies that, this incident with Gallio was kind of in the middle somewhere of his year and a half stay at Corinth. But anyway, he took leave of the brethren and put out to sea for Syria. And with him, Priscilla and Aquila. So he introduced Priscilla and Aquila at the very beginning. He just introduced them. Good story writing, right? Good narrative writing here. And then he drops them. So whenever that happens in a story, in any narrative, look for that to come up again. And that's exactly what happens here. Aquila and Priscilla come up again. It will not, interestingly, it will not be that way with Apollos. Apollos is introduced and then he's dropped. And that's where we're going in just a second. Okay, we're closing in on the end of the second missionary journey. Took leave of the brethren, went out to sea for Syria. With him, Priscilla and Aquila. Notice the reversal here. The wife's name comes first now by Luke. At the beginning, he introduced Aquila and his wife Priscilla. So Luke's kind of back and forth on that, which is interesting. In Cenchreae, he had his hair cut for he was keeping a vow. So he wants to head to Syria, but in order to get to Syria, what does he got to do? He's going to end up in Caesarea, and then he's going to go up to Antioch. But of course, there it is, right? Cenchreae is the port city of Corinth, because that's the way it works. You have these major commercial centers. Ephesus is the same way, and they're down a river. And so you have a port city that connects the water to the major city. That's true in Antioch. It's true in Ephesus with whatever it is there. Corinth with Cenchreae. It was true in Neapolis and with Neapolis and Philippi. So it's a pattern. Pay attention to patterns. Cenchreae, he had his hair cut for he was keeping a vow. We know nothing about the vow. We get a little insight into Paul. I have maintained steadfastly that Paul was a devout Jewish Christian. He was serious about his ancestral traditions and he practiced them. And he's the one, not me, he's the one who's going to say, I am a Pharisee later on. And it's for the hope of the resurrection of the dead that I stand here before you. I don't think that was a tactic to set the Pharisees against the Sadducees. I think Paul was a devout, Pharisaical, Jewish Christian. That's what I think. And so you see it here where he keeps this vow. We're going to get more of that once he gets to Jerusalem. But that's all. That just gives the reason that he stops here. Then they go to Ephesus. So on the way to Ephesus, he's back in Asia. Remember, he wasn't allowed to go to Asia. He was forbidden to have any ministry in Asia. So he swings around Macedonia and Achaia, and then he ends up in Asia. but he's just going to set foot in Asia. He just gets it's like he says, man, I'm going to have something in Asia. And so he stays just long enough to drop off Aquila and Priscilla, and then he leaves again. And then it gets really interesting after that. We talked a little bit about that last week. Came to Ephesus and he left them there. That's how long. Well, let's keep going. He himself entered the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. And when they asked him to stay for a longer time, he said, no, I can't do that. That could be because he thought, I'm just kidding. Maybe he thought he was already pushing it with God. No, I don't believe that. But he probably just wanted to drop off Aquila and Priscilla because he needs to get back he wants to get back to Jerusalem. Taking leave of them and saying, I will return to you again if God wills, he set sail from Ephesus. That's foreshadowing. Because it will only be this many verses before the text is back in Ephesus. 24. That's how long it takes. Ephesus. It's funny, when he starts the mission, there will be no ministry in Asia. But at the end of this missionary journey, and it seems to me that the stop in Ephesus wasn't really part of his planned missionary journey. He just wanted to drop off Aquila and Priscilla. Now it's all Ephesus all the time. He just has to get back there. But we get foreshadowing of that with the arrival of Apollos here in a second. So this is how long it takes for the missionary journey to end from there. When he had landed at Caesarea, he went up, greeted the church, and went down to Antioch. So he gets to Caesarea, the port city of Palestine. Whoops. What did I just do? Need this thing to go away. Thank you. The port city of Palestine right here. Here's Jerusalem. So notice, important here. Are we on the second? That's the third journey. I closed the third journey. Oh, look at that. Interesting. You can go back and forth on this. So he gets to Caesarea and he goes up. It does not name the city. Jerusalem, by name, has dropped out of the narrative. It's as if Luke is, you see a Jerusalem that's receding as an element of the gospel proclamation as it's moved to Gentile territory.
So just hints that it's Jerusalem.
Yeah, it's just going up would obviously mean you would only say going up if you're talking about to Jerusalem and then down to Antioch. We've seen that language over and over again. But yeah, it's very, very conspicuous by its absence right here. Antioch, however, is mentioned by name. And so you can see this little picture of Antioch kind of replacing Jerusalem as the center of the preaching of the gospel or something like that.
I think too, when he goes to Jerusalem, it's because he's gonna pay his vow.
There's that too, yeah.
There's
that too, yeah.
He's gonna pay his vow to Jerusalem.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
It was required 30 days after he cut his hair off.
So that would explain, if so, that would explain why he's in a hurry.
Yes,
It would also reinforce the idea that he's pretty serious about his ancestral traditions.
yes.
Not for the Gentiles. No compulsion for the Gentiles. I don't want to see you people getting circumcised. But it's my ancestral traditions, and so I'm going to practice it. That's what I think of Paul. So now he's back in Antioch. How long does he stay in Antioch? He stays in Antioch for this many words. Right here. And then he left and passed successively through the Galatian region and Phrygia, strengthening all the disciples. So the distance between his second and third missionary journey is whatever this time is right here. So he covers this much. So he covers what does he do here? Let's take a look. He covers from here to Antioch, all the way back through to Phrygia, however many miles that is, over 1,000. I don't know how far that is. He covers that in these two verses. So that so that he can get back to Ephesus. Ephesus is now the centerpiece of the mission. And so he's just not interested in what happened in Galatia and Phrygia. Now I should look at my notes. Hold on a minute. So Aquila and Priscilla got left behind. I don't even think I read that. He did not, let's see. Where does it say he left them? There, right there, verse 19. He left Priscilla and Aquila in Ephesus. And so by the time he gets back there, something's already happened. But more importantly, they will be there. None of this was planned, right? He didn't even want to go to Macedonia or Achaia, right? He didn't want to do that. But what's happened now is, since he had to do this, he's met up with Aquila and Priscilla in Corinth, and he's chosen to take them and drop them off in Ephesus, where he wanted to have a ministry in the first place. And then he leaves, and when he gets back there, they will have already talked to Apollos in Ephesus, who will have already left for the city that he founded, the church that he founded in Corinth. And so Paul goes to Ephesus, the long way. Apollos hasn't even converted yet, goes from Ephesus to Corinth to take over. So the guy that God had called to take over the work in Corinth wasn't even a believer when Paul founded the church in Corinth. So there's more of the masterpiece in action. Did Paul know any of this? Only if he got a vision. But God is not inclined to enlighten people on what he plans to do, right? He just tells you what to do. The most he got for that Macedonian vision was help us. Help us. That's all he got. And the first thing he encountered was the hostility of Philippi. Okay, let's see, catch up with the notes. We're doing pretty good. I think we're going to get, I'm not going to say it. Okay, Ephesus. Let's look at a couple things. Here's Ephesus on DuckDuckGo. This was Google. I don't know that it would say that. This is Ephesus. This is the Ark of Hadrian, I think. It was the emperor at the turn of the 1st century BC AD, after the fall of Jerusalem and stuff. But anyway, yeah, you know, it's just amazing. Where's that Roman road thing? There's a Roman road that I want to look at. They really like this Ark of Hadrian, don't they? There's the amphitheater. Look at that thing.
Did you say art of Hadrian?
Ark.
Art.
A-R-C-H-E. Look at that. I wonder if Paul ever spoke here. Look how well preserved that is. Isn't that amazing? And the acoustics are great. I don't know how, I don't think you had, the whole point of this is you don't have microphones. So everybody, you know, the guy that's sitting way up here where this guy is who took the picture, or way over here, or way up there, has to be able to hear that guy. And if he's going to talk for an hour, he's probably not going to scream. So the acoustics, it's all designed. The amphitheater thing is designed for acoustics. Roman engineering. You know, it really is amazing. Paul taking it. I don't know if he spoke here, but you know, there it is again. That's cool. So well preserved. I have a feeling that all of our football stadiums will be in quite disrepair 2,000 years from now. And this one, this amphitheater might still be standing. Okay, that's enough. Okay. Ephesus, Roman colony, port city, capital of the province of Asia, and Asia's most important commercial center. It is not that today, but that's what it was. No, it doesn't have a port city. It is its own port city. Temple of Artemis, maybe we'll look at that on the third journey because that's going to become a major issue. Temple of Artemis, which Ephesus was the center of, stood for almost 600 years. By the time the gospel arrived, it's one of the 7 wonders of the world. Let's just look at it. I think I pulled it up. So they've reconstructed it. I think I saw a documentary on this one time. But these columns are internal. You can see them going back here. is this huge, is twice the size. Oh, that's Diana. Yeah, yeah, Artemis, Diana and Artemis are the same thing. But you can see the columns going back. And then that's probably her right back there, but really spectacular.
So she's pulling up a roof, there's no.
That's right.
actual walls.
Amazing engineering.
This to the left.
This one, it's the same thing.
So you say they rebuilt it, they didn't build it at the same location.
No, I'm saying, no, they didn't build it. These are reconstructions in art, in animated, not animated.
Oh, they're not even.
No, this is it right here.
They look so real.
They do, yeah.
And that one on the right, that shadows.
Yeah. Yeah, the question of whether these bushes would have been there, I doubt.
At
any rate, Artemis is going to be the centerpiece of the debate of the Fury when he gets back to Ephesus, chapter 20, I think. There is going to be what amounts to a comedy that takes place in Ephesus just before he takes off to go back to Jerusalem. And it's going to be over this temple where he's accused, they are accused of desecrating the temple of Artemis. And
I think one of the reasons that Paul was able to discuss and argue and persuade was because there were distinct beliefs, distinct dogma, distinct doctrine on both sides, whether it be Jews or Gentiles. Today, we don't have that luxury. Today, we have truth is relative. And so if you cannot nail down somebody's beliefs today. That is almost impossible. That's one of the reasons that the gospel is
offensive.
halted in some
It's offensive,
cases.
yeah.
Because there is no doctrine, there is no strict.
Yep, I think I agree with that. And I think that's held now in the post-World War II era. The relativism of truth and morality, principle, reality. Reality itself in the post-World War II era has been taught to be be a relative thing by professors at major universities. But I think that's giving way with this little thing called social justice. And they are maintaining an orthodoxy of social justice, and they're not taking no for an answer. And they're not willing to say, you have your beliefs about social justice and we have our beliefs about social justice, and we'll just go on your way and I'll go on my way. They are not willing to do that with social justice, which I think is becoming rapidly the world's, as I've said before, the world's secular religion, and it is authoritarian. So that may be changing in our current time. You get up in the college campus, you say the wrong thing about 10 different modern social phenomena, race or whatever, and you will be cast out. You get up on Twitter and do that, you will be cast out. You'll be thrown out of TV series, movies, run out of town. I mean, very, very intolerant. So I think we're heading back towards something. We're at the end of one thing and the beginning of another. I'm just not sure what we're at the end of or what we're at the beginning of. But you have to wait a while to figure that out. They'll write books on that. Were you gonna say something?
One of our doctors told us the story of what's happening in the university. He says he was lecturing on endocrinology and saying that people that go through sex change by hormones and surgery, they are more susceptible to these physical illnesses. He is being sued.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the doctors, like the doctor said, he make no moral judgment at all.
In his mind,
Stating facts.
in their mind,
Right.
he violated one of their moral principles
Yeah.
and their tenets.
Yeah.
He spoke heresy, and we're back to the idea of the relativization
Relativization.
of reality.
Well, not only that, but they believe in a dogma and in a belief system that has no proof behind it except their strong belief.
But that's why you have to have all the tools of propaganda reinforcing it, like Nazism or communism or any of these things. You have to have all those tools and you have to keep reinforcing the narrative. Whatever the narrative is you're holding as authoritative, which in this case changes all the time. You have to keep reinforcing it and making, it's like a school of fish, right? Schools, you have a school of fish. You don't want to be one of the fish that gets caught out on his own. So you're looking to see when the school, that's why the school looks like it's one organism, because none of the fish want to be the one on the outside. So everybody stays within the school. And that's the way that's the way it is now. These people are getting ahead of it. And they get out there, they post on Twitter, they do these things so that they make sure they stay within the school. And they re-preach their orthodoxy on a regular basis, even if it's not called for.
And
So,
there
anyway.
is no defense against something like that.
No.
Except the truth.
It's
And the problem is that the truth isn't being accepted.
it's designed to find transgressors. It's designed to produce transgressors. But we're way off the fly. I'll take the blame for this one. We're way off. This is a whole summer. We could do this stuff for a whole summer. I made a chart. I made a little busy dialogue, busy chart of how I think we got here a couple of years ago. And I've had to change it. I've actually updated it 2 or 3 times. That's how fast things are moving on the question of social justice. Viruses can become a plank in social justice. Vaccination can become a plank in social justice. Masks, all that stuff now has a part to play in this new thing that is taken over, past tense. Okay. I was going to get there, but now I don't know that I'm going to get there. Okay, Priscilla and Aquila, Romans 16, they pop up. We'll look at this. We'll look at Paul's letters a little bit because the events in Acts are the things that Paul is going through and writing about when he writes the letters. They're happening at the same time. So sometimes that's interesting. Here's the end of Romans. Greek Prisca, he uses the formal name of Priscilla. Luke likes to use the formal names, Sosthenes, Silas, and so forth. Paul likes to use the informal, Luke likes to use the informal names. Paul likes to use the formal names. So Paul uses Silvanus instead of Silas. Paul uses Prisca instead of Priscilla. Greet Priscilla and Aquila, my fellow workers in Christ Jesus, who for my life risked their own necks, to whom not only do I give thanks, but also all the churches of the Gentiles. Very influential couple that Paul venerates here. And also greet the church that is in their house. But where does he write this to? He writes this to Rome. So by the time this letter is written, Priscilla and Aquila, who had been kicked out of Rome by the decree of Claudius, made their way to Corinth just in time to meet Paul, where we'll take them to Ephesus, where they will found a church together and save Apollos, who will go back to Corinth and make that church grow. Then they end up back in Rome, where they are and they have a church there. The plan of God, man. It involves people, places, and things. I don't really know what things now that I've said that. All right. So Claudius died in 54. He's going to be replaced by Nero. So that's only a couple of years away here. So they may have gone right back to Rome shortly after this, if this is 52 or so. Then the new emperor Nero comes in. He rescinds the edict because that's how it worked then. It wasn't like an act of Congress. And now the Jews can go back to Rome, which is what they do. Let's see. I have put here that maybe the reason Paul wanted to go back to Jerusalem is he wanted to go to a festival, but I like their idea better. Then he needs to take care of this vow thing. I didn't think of that. Let's see. So he lands in Caesarea, the head of the provincial government, the Roman government, Roman administration in Palestine. And we have the end of the second missionary journey. And we're not going to get time to get to Apollos. That's a bummer. Fascinating character. We can talk about the third missionary journey, but really the third, there's all kinds of travels here, but from Luke's perspective, it's all about Ephesus. So let me just, we'll have to stop. We'll get to Apollos next week. There's so much going on. I didn't know this when I first started studying this again. This looks nothing like what I did in 2006 when I first taught this. We did this class. We did Acts in 2006, took 2.5 years. I'm pretty sure that almost nothing I've said here is what I said in 2006, but it just seems so obvious now. You know, I just missed it. So 24, one of the more enigmatic, I've been wanting to use that word too. Cool. Serendipity and enigmatic in one. One of the most enigmatic characters in biblical narrative, precisely because this is the only mention of him. And then there's all this speculation about whether the book of Hebrews is written by Apollos, which is what I think, which would explain why anyone cares about him, other than the fact that he's so influential in the church in Corinth. Those would be the two reasons. But yep, 24, we'll learn a little bit about Apollos and move on to the third missionary journey, which we're already in, as a matter of fact now. Okay, thank you for joining. Adios.